Washington's getting some reinforcements on the defensive line very soon.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hansen. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you're getting this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the program out a lot. Now, Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers today. It's the bye week, so we're still obviously going to get in some pressing team updates, but we want to take some time to make some bold predictions and look down the line a little bit for next season. It's going to be a lot of fun, so stay tuned for that. We also want to talk about some of the early impact from this transfer portal class and just how impressive the evaluation from Washington's coaching staff and just front office has been so far. But most importantly, we're going to go in order of how soon these guys are coming back. Washington is getting some reinforcements in the front seven very, very soon, starting with defensive tackle Logan Sagapolu and outside linebacker Deshawn Lynch.
I think of the two, Deshawn Lynch is going to be the more impactful felt one, especially against Washington State and Ohio State. But even for me, when you think about what he brings, and it's a little bit of a caveat to where we saw him last season and what we expect him to do this fall is a little bit different, but not totally different. But I think when you look at his position versatility, where Logan is kind of just is what he is, big mauler in the middle who can eat two blockers and create those double team opportunities and free up somebody else. Deshawn Lynch is the guy that gets freed up. That's the guy who could either be inside or outside. And I think for me, when you look at where we talk about the pass rush coming from, where the, strengths and not necessarily weaknesses are, but lack of, production, shall we say. I think that's why Deshawn Lynch is without question going to be the more impactful of the two.
So I like where you're going with that. I think I would tend to agree, where I'm really intrigued to see what Logan is going to do in the run game, especially, again, as you said, as we get into the tougher opponents and Big Ten play. Having a guy like that who, especially when rotating with another just big hulking nose tackle like Simone Peppa, is going to be a really nice addition to the run defense, short yardage situations. We're going to see both of those guys out on the field. So I think he's going to be really impactful, but I like where you're going with Deshawn Lynch. I disagree that we're going to see him on the inside. I feel like we saw enough of that last season where the coaching staff, I don't want to say they weren't happy with it, but I think that was one of the reasons that they brought so many bodies in on the interior, is to let him play more outside linebacker, which is what he did at Sacramento State. And that's where he was at his best, where he was most productive in 2023. 3.5 sacks, I believe, was the number, 6 or 7 tackles for loss. And it's something where having a big athlete at that size, close to 300 pounds, I like to reference in 2024 when we saw him try to chase down Damon Williams in the open field and did a pretty nice job of staying with him, to be honest, where I think that that's where he's going to be at his most impactful, is somebody like that who can come onto the field and stop the run. You can have him rotate with Isaiah Ward a little bit more often and maybe get into more of a rotation with Zach Durfee and Jacob Lane on the other side, where if that's your top 4 edge rushers with, Devin Hyde still mixing in, maybe a little bit more Hayden Moore as well as we move forward, having that as your group on the outside is going to, I think, do wonders for you when you can have a little bit more of a rotation and have guys have a little bit more of a defined role, where you still obviously are going to need to do a little bit of everything because, the offense, you have to react to the offense. It's not the other way around. But as I just kind of look at what Deshawn is going to bring to the table, I think his size, strength, and athleticism on the outside is going to certainly help this run defense out a lot as we get into tougher play. But the one guy who you and I really think is I think it's pretty obvious here that the coaching staff is really waiting on, that seems to be a little bit farther away from getting back to the field, is Jayvon Parker.
This would be the one, and I know we're going to just repeat myself here, where if you're picking up the 3, it's Jayvon Parker, and no offense to Deshawn, it's not close. But I think, when Jayvon does come back, where if it happens to be against Washington State, that's a bonus.
It's not going to be.
Probably
He's a lot further away.
And again, I'm just saying, like, that's why whenever he does come back, it's going to be worth the wait. where, especially with the injury that he had, you never want to rush a guy back from that. And even if he's able to, be in shape now and get closer, there's no need, especially with, as we've talked about for months now, the bodies that you have up front, the number of depth, all those different types of body types. There's no reason to rush Jayvon when you still have him for 2026. And, I don't think he has another year after that. Could be wrong, but we'll see how that works out. There's enough depth in there to where when Jayvon does come back, his presence will absolutely be felt. The impact he had against the run, insurmountable last season, where we saw that dip after the Rutgers game and things like that. But for me, I am totally okay with Jayvon needing to take his time to get back, because I'd rather have him take the time, make him properly come back probably early October, mid-October at the latest, versus let's get him back for Ohio State and, something catastrophic happens.
So the one correction I will say there is that he probably would have another year of eligibility if he, doesn't play or plays in 4 or less games this season, where that's certainly a condition where you can apply for a medical redshirt, where you didn't have to last year because he played in 4 games and you could just throw one on him that he didn't use in his true freshman season in 2022. So I like where you're going with that. And there's certainly so much that Jayvon brings to field, both as a run defender and as a pass rusher. And I think that's where I'm more excited to see what kind of impact he brings. Again, assuming he can just make it back healthy. And let's just call it the next month. Let's throw out the Illinois game as a possible return date. I'm not, I'm just speculating there. And I want to just talk about that in the hypothetical sense here, because he is someone where I've been really intrigued with watching his rehab process. We've seen him suit up for a couple of practices. Jedd Fisch has said he's suited up and started to ramp up a little bit more in some of the midweek practices, some of the Sunday walkthrough stuff that they do. So I'm intrigued to see what it's going to look like, because the biggest, and it's very noticeable when you see him, the biggest thing, and again, I mean that literally, is he's put on weight. He's up to like 315, 320 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark, because I think they want to try him at nose tackle, but he also has the size, strength, and athleticism to be a solid 3 or a 5 tech if you want him to. So I'm just curious to see how that extra weight will just carry over into strength, because I know Sebastian Valdez told us back in March that he's probably the strongest guy on the team with Valdez looking for the NFL. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work out. And I just think that he's the kind of guy where he's shown he can be a game changer on the interior, no matter what the situation is. He has been that kind of guy. And again, you mentioned it against Rutgers. He really had that breakout performance that you were looking for. And it was unfortunate that the season ended the way that he did. And before we get to the linebackers here for a quick second, I think it's very much worth noting that the way the coaching staff talks about him, it's so clear that they still have plans for him this year. And, despite all the transfer portal, just acquisitions and everything else, Jayvon still seems to be one of the biggest keys, because we've seen what he can do against Big Ten competition. Yes, it was very limited, but we still saw what that looks like. And I think that he's one guy who can truly change the defense whenever he does get back. And that being said, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how, when, and truly if these 2 linebackers come back in Jacob Manu and Zaydrius Rainey-Sale, who are both coming off ACL injuries.
Those are the 2 kind of enigmas in the room, because you have Buda Alukta and actually Alexander at linebacker. You can call Alex McLaughlin a linebacker / just center of the defense at this point with what he's able to do. I don't know truly, like, if Jacob does come back, not yet, but when Jacob comes back, let's put it that way, where does he fit in? Because Buda's looked pretty good. Now, again, once we get into Big Ten play, that's really where this matters most. And I think that's kind of why Jedd and the staff lined it up the way they did, where you can kind of get a sense from the non-conference play of where you're at depth-wise, Buda adjusting to Ryan Walters' defense. But then beyond that, are you going to be rotating Buda and Jacob that much? Is it worth playing Jacob in 8 games? I think because again, he has the red shirt, like we talked about with Jayvon Parker. Why not kind of sparse those games out to where you keep him in 4 or 5, whatever the bowl game ends up being, and then bring him back next season where Buda has a good season, or even if Buda comes back next season, that's a much better position to be in than throwing Jacob in for 6 games in the regular season and now it's a wash for whatever happens in the future.
So I feel like you can rotate him in with Devin Bryant if you want to go down that road. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because before we move on here, one thing was Zaydrius Rainey-Sale, who Jedd Fisch noted on Monday, is about a month behind in terms of where he is in the rehab process because of when his surgery was and when the injury was. I think that this is a guy who, a lot like Russell Davis did last year for a game or 2 before he wound up getting hurt again, which is unfortunate. I feel like Zaydrius might be able to give you some kind of impact at outside linebacker. He's just such a big, physical, powerful kid, even at this point in his development, that if you want to throw him out there as a pass rusher for the 3-4 games in November and still let him preserve his red shirt, I think there's just something to be explored there. And that's something that we're going to keep you updated on right here on Locked On Huskies. But we need to move on here, Lars, because so many of these transfer portal acquisitions have really proven to be impact guys. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IAHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. We've also got a message from our good friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you ordered, these players delivered when it matters most. Let's break it down. For Washington, it's got to be Jonah Coleman again. He delivered in a big way. 5 touchdowns, Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week for the second straight week. When the pressure was on, he came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Jonah Coleman is on a streak. And just like Jonah delivered for the Huskies, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every time you order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Lars, as we move on here, one thing that I think has really stood out to me through these first couple of games is how many transfer portal acquisitions have made a big impact on the game in one way or another. And for me, it's no shocker who I think we should start with first, because I excluded Tacario Davis from this. Being ranked as a top 10 transfer, like overall, I feel like just gives you a different stature. It's got to be Alex McLaughlin.
I will agree with that just for the sake of argument, but I do have a pushback when I get to my guy.
Please, yeah.
But without question, certainly on defense, Alex McLaughlin has been the guy, and that's no slight to Ontario, Ty, you go down the list, Buddha, as I just mentioned last segment. But Alex really has kind of been that MVP, Swiss Army knife, do-it-all kind of guy. And I still, crazy as it sounds, think he can get better. As, you know, the Kalen Stab would say, left some meat on the bone, you know, those type of things where you're looking at it and saying, I don't think he has any missed tackles to his credit. It has like 1 or 2 PBUs maybe, but I'm still looking for Alex to make, you know, take that next gear, find that if let's say he's in second gear right now, wait till Big Ten play when he gets into third and fourth gear. That's really where I think we're going to see what Alex McLaughlin offered at NAU shine bright at Washington, where making plays, tackles for loss, sacks, interceptions, like the filling up the stat box game after game. I think that's still something I want to see from Alex, but no doubt about it. I mean, from an impact from day one, I mean, we talked about it in the spring where, okay, maybe he'll rotate in, you know, CJ Krishna will kind of be that guy as a senior. No, it's been Alex and it's not close. But for me, it's the senior on the offensive side and it's Carver Willis. I think that, you know, to me has kind of been the guy where if you're going to look at, like you just mentioned during the break with Jonah Coleman, did the monster season he's having in the offense. Shout out. But with that being said, you know, we knew Carver could make that transition from right tackle to left tackle, but it really has been a seamless transition. And I know when we reference the PFF stats where he's got, I think, 3 or 4 pressures to his credit, those really aren't his fault. And I think when we get into Big Ten play, you're going to see that offensive line cohesion remain true. And I think it's because you have 2 bookend tackles, starting with a veteran like Carver, and then Drew kind of becoming that emerging veteran. But you don't have Drew unless you have a true veteran like Carver on the other side.
Your point is very valid. I think especially when we look at what Carver has brought, not just on the field, but off the field as well, as a leader and just a real great voice for that room. I think he has certainly been impactful. I went more with the theme of the segment, though. When I think of the best evaluations of talent, you're absolutely right. Looking at that guy and saying, oh yeah, he's been playing right tackle for 4 years, and we think he needs to gain a lot of weight too to play in the Big Ten, flipping him over the left side and him looking like this early on, granted against inferior competition, is very impressive. And I love to see that for sure. I went with Alex McLaughlin because this is an FCS gem where it's one of those things where you look at, like, I'm glad you mentioned CJ Christian in the same light, and it's unfortunate he wasn't able to play against UC Davis, but it looks like he'll probably wind up being back soon. I think that Alex is just this perfect example where it was something I was having a conversation with a few of our insiders in terms of, check out the link to that in the description below, by the way, in terms of the evaluation of talent. Like we talked about on yesterday's show with Desmond Roebuck. Having somebody like that, just an underrated prospect for whatever reason, with Alex playing at the FCS level, maybe being a little bit undersized as well. With Desmond, same thing, undersized, not playing at like the biggest high school in the area. Having guys like that who are able to come in and make an impact early on is such a great testament to what this coaching staff and this front office with Matt Doherty, Jake Crawford, Marcus Griffin, all those guys, what they're really, really good at too, is going out and finding players that might be overlooked for one reason or another, but it's, wait, no, this guy's got an elite trait here. He's got an elite trait there. Another guy that I'll reference, just a hint at what we're going to be talking about later in terms of 2026 guys who are going to make an impact, might burn their red shirt, in Rajon Duncan too, where that guy was certainly an under the radar cornerback in terms of rankings and offers and everything. But you go out there and you offer that guy, you get him to commit quickly, and now it's, whoa, not only is he rising in the ranks, but look at this film and look at what this guy does. And I think Alex is the perfect embodiment of all of that because, I remember we talked about this a lot when he committed. This is an under the radar FCS guy, but look, we both think that he can start this year and make a big impact. And that's exactly what he's done.
And at the heart of every good evaluation is projectability, but within that, knowing that Alex could add the weight, knowing that he could take care of himself and handle that level up, if you will. Absolutely. Where you're going from the FCS to the just Power 4 in general is one thing, but you're going to the Big Ten. And right now, I mean, he's probably 202, 201, whatever he ends up being listed at. But the point being that he got his body in the right shape. And again, as Jedd will say, shout out to Tyler Owens and the entire strength staff, because those guys, I mean, first of all, we need to maybe spend 30 seconds to say shout out to those guys because they have really gotten this team purring early on in the season, which we traditionally haven't seen from Washington teams under previous coaching regimes. So I think that's worth mentioning. But Alex being able to get his body right by the start of the season and even going into fall camp, I think that was, to me, why he ended up being a starter and why he's excelled so much. It's to everything you're saying. When you evaluate guys, it's okay, well, he might have this good skill set or he might look like this against this competition. But can it look the same, if not even better, against better competition on a week in, week out basis? I think that's where the staff nails. Like, some schools are good at evaluating talent, but they can't maximize talent. UW and Jedd and Matt Doherty and everybody you just mentioned, not only can evaluate the talent, but they can maximize it too. And I think that's what's so imperative in all of this. And kind of in a way, a guy that probably deserves a shout out, and I know you're going to be a big fan about this, so I'll give you the floor to expand on it, is Kade Eldridge. A guy that, when we say like most impactful or impressive transfers, yeah, Kade Eldridge is probably not coming to mind for 9 out of 10 people here. But it's worth noting the way he's used and things like that, and the way that Jedd envisioned it, coming from USC and out of Linden where he didn't have a ton of offers. Like, Jedd's found a way to maximize the heck out of Kade Eldridge.
Absolutely. And that is one of the guys that I wanted to make sure we discussed in this, because as I'm kind of looking up and down this list, there are so many other, really impactful transfers, not just from this past cycle, but the one before that as well. When, we were just talking about Logan Sagapolu and everything that goes into playing, like after 4 years of offensive line between Oregon and Miami, flipping over the defensive side of the ball is not easy. And I feel like with Kade Eldridge, after spending a couple of years at USC and not necessarily being maximized in terms of coaching, in terms of potential, coming up to Washington, it's really been fun to see him develop. And yeah, as you said, shout out to Tyler Owens and the strength staff for everything they're doing. But seeing what Kade Eldridge put on film, which was basically zero, and not having a lot to go off of, and finding ways to use him in the offense the way that they have, is really fun and it's really cool. And I love to see that because it shows that, yeah, you're willing to take a risk on a guy who hasn't had much experience in the Big Ten, for one reason or another. And at the same point, it's no, we're going to find a way to use this guy. And I remember when we got a chance to talk to him during fall camp, a lot of us in the media had just a massive smile on our face when one of the things he said was, yeah, it's always been my dream to play fullback here at Washington. And that was just the most awesome thing I've ever heard. And I just love the football junkie, like that kind of mindset. It was really cool to see him rewarded with a touchdown in the opener against Colorado State as well. And one of the biggest reasons that, I really enjoyed hearing that was that's certainly not something that everybody wants to do. And, just play a position like that, which has become somewhat outdated and, a lot of guts and, work going to that position with very little glory. But it's one of those things when, you look at Washington's offensive numbers this season, rushing for 300 plus yards against UC Davis, almost 300 yards against Colorado State as well. A lot of that is, testament to sometimes lining up with a fullback in there and a guy like Kade Eldridge who is just willing to go downhill and block. And one of the reasons I wanted to make sure I talked about this again before we move on here is this is something where in the spring, I can't remember who it was, but there was one play where he went in motion. He was lined up at tight end, motions to the other side of the formation, and the ball snapped in the middle of his motion. And he's supposed to line up and block an outside linebacker, and he got run over. He just got straight up run over. And it was kind of like, oh, okay, let's see what happens here. Now, moving positions has certainly helped him a little bit. But as you said, with the added weight and strength that he's put on, it's really cool to see what his development has looked like and how it was something where, we were looking at his acquisition. It was, well, hold on. You got a couple of tight ends coming in Baron Naone and Austin Simmons, plus, Ryan Otten was still around at the time. Charlie Kroll was still around coming off his ACL injury. It was what kind of role are you going to have for this guy who hasn't been coached much at USC? And seeing how the coaching staff has found a way to get him into the mix is really awesome.
And just real quick on that, worth noting that also helps maximize Quentin Moore, where he's mostly a blocker
Absolutely.
as well. And getting both of those guys on the field in different roles, that is vital because you're not taking away one, you're maximizing both.
Absolutely. And, as a former JUCO transfer, shout out to Quentin Moore, who Jedd Fisch on Monday said is the best blocking tight end in college football that he's ever been around. But Lars, let's switch gears here. We've gotten some recruiting questions and let's make some bold predictions on who's going to play next year from the class of 2026. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. We've also got a message from our good friends over at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. One of the awesome things about Monarch is I noticed that you can identify that you aren't saving as much as you thought. Monarch helps you notice an inefficient investment allocation and discover forgotten 401ks from past jobs. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Lars, we wanted to have a little fun here where we're looking at this class of 2025 right now, and we know that there are going to be at least 6 players who are not going to redshirt. And I wanted to tie this in together with someone who we both know is not going to redshirt in 5-star offensive tackle Kodi Greene, because a few weeks ago, and for all David Days out there, I know the ins and outs of recruiting rules can be a little bit annoying sometimes, where even there are things you and I forget. One big thing is you as a coach are not allowed to mention a player by name until they sign. So a couple weeks ago, I went back and caught this. I missed it in the moment. One thing that Jedd Fisch said when talking about the offensive line ahead of week 1 is, yeah, we have a really nice plan for Pocky, John Mills, all these guys. And then he said, and with what's coming down the pipeline too, we're really excited about what's next. And it was very clear he was talking about the 3 offensive line commits in this class: 3-star Adeong Yang, 3-star Dominic Harris, and 5-star Kodi Greene. And I know there were some people who were a little upset with John Mills getting a start right away, the whole true freshman, not being ready kind of thing. And he's looked awesome through the first couple of weeks. And as I look down the road to what 2026 could look like, from everything it sounds like, from what you and I have heard coming out of the program, plus the way this is just shaping up, I don't think there's any way that Kodi Greene redshirts next season.
I absolutely agree that Cody's the guy who passes the eye test automatically. But I think given the way they prioritized him, flipping him from Oregon, all those types of things, you don't put all those resources, all that effort, everything just to redshirt him, just to play him in 4 games, just to do things like that. And that doesn't preclude, because the situation you're going at left tackle, it's open, but you got some kind of reassurances there where, I don't think Drew kicks over, but you got enough bodies to where there's going to be a legit competition. I think Max McRee still has a year left somewhere in their ballpark maybe. But with that being said, there's nobody that you look at right now on the roster. Pocky could, John could. Well, why not play Kodi Greene? Why not play Pocky at right, John at left? And now you have all 3 of those guys on the line at the same time. You didn't, and that's kind of the perfect world where Washington could be in. And I know it sounds crazy to say perfect world and true freshman left tackle starting, but just go turn on the tape. Even when he was at Eastside Catholic, you knew right as a sophomore, sophomore, that was going to be a guy that could play at the Power 4 and Power 2 level. And I think I really want to hear Jedd slip up, and I probably can now, but just to where when he finally gets to talk about Kodi Greene, what do you think the over-under for how long that talk is going to go for? 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes?
Oh, absolutely. It's at least 2 minutes.
So long on that. And I think for that reason why there's so many things that Jedd has envisioned for Kodi. And I would also throw in Dominic Harris, I think might be a sneaky kind of guy where he will probably redshirt, but if he doesn't, I also won't be surprised.
So I like where you're going with that. And, I look at Dominic Harris, and if they get him into a couple games, a lot like it seems to be the plan with Champ Tilialia this year, I think that's going to wind up being the course of action. Yeah, you look at Kodi Greene, and that's a guy where 6'6", 320 right now. He's such a fluid mover, man. And as you were kind of saying, maybe he plays left tackle next season. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think right now they might want to start him off on the right side. And my thought is I feel like we're going to see a lot of Champ Tilialia at right guard next season. I feel like with the way Drew Party has played early on this year, where, depending on what happens with him next year, we might see a John Mills, Pocky Finau style rotation at right guard between Kodi and Champ next season. And then the plan is to kick him out to right tackle after that. That's just a stretch. I know our insiders in our last Q&A, I had a different take where he maybe ends up at one of the tackle spots. It all seems very, very possible with John and Pocky being at left tackle and left guard. The order, that's up to you to figure out. But there are a couple other guys who wanted to make sure we talked about here. It's just speaking of big, physical, crazy fluid movers, these 2 4-star defensive linemen in T.I. Umu-Cais and Derek Colman-Brusa, I truly don't think there's any way you keep those guys off the field next year.
Yeah, when we were going down the list of guys, I had about 5 or 6 names written, and the first one, ironically, was T.I. Like that to me absolutely. Is a guy where there's 0. I know we say don't say 0, but there is literally a 0 chance that he does not play all 12, 13 games, barring injuries, separate things that don't factor into that right now, just because of everything you mentioned. And I think the same goes for Derek. I just wonder if Derek's a guy where maybe he gets 10, 11 games, maybe just kind of with the depth that you have. I get there's no slight to Derek because, by the way, just like Kodi Greene, you look at Derek, and I would have thought him and Lowen would switch places, where Lowen's the senior this year in high school, and Derek's the true freshman already playing, because, my word, dude's got a friggin' freight train.
6'6", 275.
Yeah, and built like an outhouse, if you know the expression there. And so, to me, both those guys, yeah, they're playing double-digit games next season easy.
I think both those guys play in every game, and it's something where I'm really interested with Derek, especially where one of the reasons that this is probably going to happen is we look at this unit and you're losing 5 defensive linemen to graduation. You're losing 3 transfers. Logan Sagapolu's out the door. Deshawn Lynch is as well. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities. And for a guy like Derek at that size, I don't think full-time edge rusher is in his future, where he's probably going to play some 3-tech or some 5-tech, just one of those interior spots, a lot like Taitaui Uiagalelei. I feel like that's going to be the case where maybe a little bit more edge rusher than we've seen from Taitai so far this season. So I'm really curious what that's going to look like. As for T.I., that's a kid with the way his feet and his hands are right now, and just the base and the anchor that he's able to play with in the run game is so much fun to watch. And I think that he's someone where you're going to find a way to get both of those guys on the field in every single game next year. And I think they're going to make some kind of impact. How big is yet to be seen. But before we get out of here, we both wanted to give one just kind of under the radar guy who is not going to redshirt, because I kind of look around, and even as I look into the secondary, you're losing a lot of guys on the back end. But as you look at, Jaron Jones, Gavin Day, Rajon Duncan, they all look like they could add a little bit of weight, and I think they're going to see the field. I don't think there's a question about that. How much, it's yet to be seen. I have my thoughts, but I want to hand the floor over to you first.
Well, so I want to answer that just by saying I would throw Kasani Giles in that mix. I think he's the guy where as a Swiss Army knife, but I'm going to go off the wall just because I want you to kind of expand on who you want. CJ Wallace. That is an under the radar guy where, Grady Gross is leaving. You have Ethan, but, I think clearly UW's going to use 2 kickers every year. I think that just to me seems like the plan moving forward with the emphasis on special teams. So if CJ comes in and ends up playing all 13 games, whether he's doing kickoffs, just field goals, takes Grady's role, whatever it ends up being, I would not be surprised if CJ is the one where you talk about under the radar on the 247 page. He's the last guy listed, mostly because he's a kicker. But that's a guy to me where if he's like the first guy to burn his redshirt, not going to be surprised.
So I think he does play in some capacity. It's true. With Ethan Michalski having one more year of eligibility, I'm curious to see what that split is going to look like. And the coaching staff probably has a plan for that. We just haven't seen it yet, and we'll hear about it more at a later date. I have a lot of thoughts here, because for all the everydayers out there who are probably screaming at us, where is the name Brian Bonner? Yeah, he's going to play next year. 100% going to play next year. Got to make sure that's thrown out there. And I look at this defensive backs class, and that's why I wanted to highlight those names as, this guy's probably going to find a way out there. This guy's probably going to find a way onto the field. I really was torn by this for a while. And the one who I think might shock some people more because of the positional value and where this unit is right now than anything else, Mason James is going to be on the field next year. Like, I think that's one where you're going to look at the ranking and you're going to say, how is this an under the radar guy? Because he's, a 4-star, one of the top 5 commits in terms of numbers in this class. But you look at this wide receiver core where Raiden Vinesbright, Desmond Roebuck are both, as of right now, projected to start against Washington State. Chris Lawson has been on the field. You and I have, raved about Justice Williams, what we've seen from him. There are still these other, young freshmen, Marcus Harris, Deshawn Jose, that this coaching staff is really high on. There are so many other guys at this position, but Mason is just tailor-made for this offense. The speed, the ability to get open from inside and out, everything that he does. And I know I've said this before, but it all just feels, very like boilerplate, in a sense of, you look at what this coaching staff looks for at wide receivers. It's, this guy is listed at 5'10", 175, but what does he do? No, he gets open. He's really shifty. He's got great feet. Is a really crisp route runner. Mason does all those things. And if he can come in and do that right away, I'm not going to bat an eye, because he is just that kind of player. And I think there's a role for him in some capacity next year.
I agree. I just thought for everything you said, and it's all true about Mason, I just thought you were going to go Blaze LaVista. Because to me,
I was so tempted. I really was.
Because the reason why I wouldn't have gone with Mason is for every reason you said, but also because outside, Denzel's gone. Omari's gone. Rashid's going to be the most veteran guy out there, arguably, in terms of unless you bring in a transfer. And so why not have, Blaze LaVista just be an outside guy, 6'2", 6'3", the speed you talk about, blazing speed like that. That just to me would have been where I would have gone with that.
No, that's fair. I consider Justice Williams in that. And then having Deshawn Jose kind of play that same mix too. If Rashid moves outside to play a little bit more X, I also think that's something that's well within the realm of possibilities here. So I love Blaze. I do. The everydayers know I do. I just think that that's something to consider in that conversation as well. And we've seen these guys on the interior who can play the slot get a little bit more run early so far in Jedd Fisch's UW tenure. But Lars, that's all we got today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the season. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, we're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single single day. So please make sure to click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.